Let's talk now to former British Army Colonel and chemical weapons expert Hamish de Bretton-Gordon. Hamish, a very good morning to you. Yesterday, we saw quite a big number of sort of developments. We saw Vladimir Putin's 2-hour speech in which he blamed the West for the invasion of Ukraine and said it was all their fault. Basically, he said that Russia was simply defending its history, defending its way of life, defending its culture. Basically trying to convince his home audience, I suppose, that Russia is in some way in danger. Joe Biden then made a big speech in Warsaw. He was in Ukraine the other day. There does seem to have been a lot of activity this week. What do you think it's sort of aimed at? Where do you think it's got us?
Well, I think there are a number of things, Mike, and thanks very much for having me on. We've got the 12-month, the year anniversary coming up on Friday. And I think, first of all, with Putin, I mean, his 2-hour rant yesterday, you know, it's not the sort of things that he was saying that you'd want to hear from a autocratic dictator who has enough nuclear weapons to destroy the planet. Some of the stuff he's saying there about pulling out of nuclear treaties, potentially to start testing his nuclear again. So very much, as you say, for his home audience. And I think also for the henchmen, the strongmen around him who are probably keeping him in power. Conversely, Biden, after his trip to Kyiv this week, really stating again that the US and NATO is absolutely full score behind Ukraine, and we must enable Ukraine to prevail, because if we don't, there could be even worse problems down the line. So I think it is a very important week where Russia military conventionally is failing. Ukraine is getting the upper hand. And during all of this conflict, Putin has always waved the nuclear flag, really to try and keep NATO out. But that, thus far, has failed.
And does it inevitably lead to NATO becoming more involved? Because, I mean, Joe Biden said yesterday that, you know, NATO has never been more united, it's never been stronger, it's never been a more kind of powerful organisation. He mentioned Finland and Sweden as well wanting to join. You know, it feels as though he's sort of ratcheting up the rhetoric from NATO's side as well.
Well, I think so. I think it's absolutely essential that Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine is not allowed to prevail. It is key that the West and NATO shows a very strong arm. The reason I think that Putin invaded in the first place a year ago is that he thought NATO was weak. He thought that NATO would do nothing, which was fair enough, because we did very little to help people in Syria who were also under attack from not only their own regime, but also the Russians. So it was our fault, and it's taken us 12 months to get to a position where we're saying, no, this sort of illegal adventurism by the Russians will not be tolerated, and we will protect Ukraine, because, you know, I'm of the group who agree that Ukraine would not be the end of it. So we have got to be resolute, and we've also got to be resolute on the nuclear issue. I still think, despite what Putin is saying, that it is unlikely that Putin will go nuclear in Ukraine. But we have all been assuming, I think, for the last 12 months, that Putin will not go nuclear. And it might sound rather counterintuitive, but I think we should assume that he will go nuclear and plan against it, so that Putin realizes that we're serious here, and in a sort of double bluff. But we mustn't allow his threats, you know, every month of dirty bombs, nuclear attack, chemical attack, biological attack, to make us waver and not continue to support Ukraine until the end.
Quite. A lot of people think as well, Hamish, that there's going to be some kind of activity militarily on Friday, because Russia believes quite a lot in these kind of anniversaries, and it's the one-year anniversary, as you say. Certainly some people in Kiev are worried that there might be an attack launched. Is that a sort of a verifiable threat, if you like?
Well, I'm not sure that the intelligence coming out of the Donbass and elsewhere are necessarily indicating some great thrust. I don't think the Russians have the combat power to do it. Ukraine has done a fantastic job thus far with Western weaponry, tipping the balance. We know that the armour, we know the tanks are going to be due in combat in a few weeks' time, and that again will tip the balance. Sadly, I expect the Russians will try and do something spectacular on Friday. No doubt it'll be a whole host of missiles aimed at Kyiv and other major cities in Ukraine. And let's hope those air defences that have done such a good job thus far carry on doing it. But as far as anything more than that, be it a major thrust in the Donbass or up from Crimea, I don't really see that. The intelligence isn't there. And I think really goes back to my beginning piece here that Putin is getting into a tight corner. He is losing. His options are getting less and less, and Ukraine is only getting more powerful. And hopefully we, the West, can enable Ukraine to prevail this summer, get the Russians out of their country, then we can have a peace and start to rebuild this country, which has absolutely been flattened by the Russians.
Yeah. It's been pummeled, hasn't it? Absolutely pummeled. Is there a danger that China might sort of find themselves moving closer to Russia, though, in this kind of world game of chess, if you like?
Absolutely, Mike. I think the Chinese dynamic is absolutely key to this and as important. And I think we heard news today and yesterday that senior Chinese officials are in Moscow. And Biden's made it absolutely clear, I think, to Beijing that any advanced weaponry given to the Russians by the Chinese would be tantamount to China getting into bed with Russia. And I'm sure that the Americans have the influence of the Chinese, not least because the Chinese economy is almost entirely based on the US market. But China is a key issue here. We know China is tripling its holdings of nuclear warheads to a size to compare with the UK and France, not at the levels of Russia and the US. But it is very important that they stay out of this. And I'm sure that Biden is making it very clear to the Chinese that that would not be tolerated. But you're absolutely right. They are a key player. And them staying out thus far has made sure that this hasn't expanded outside the sort of Ukraine theatre of operations. And that's how it should remain. And I hope that, the Americans and the NATO allies are also making that clear to the Chinese.
No, of course. Hamish, thank you very much indeed. Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, former British Army colonel, chemical weapons expert as well.